The call came on a Wednesday afternoon, while I was in the back office of my second shop, going through the week's invoices, the way I did every Wednesday. The same chair, the same lukewarm cup of tea going cold beside the keyboard. My son's name appeared on the screen. I remember thinking that was unusual, because Liam rarely called during business hours. He knew I was always somewhere between the two shops on a Wednesday, either at the Ellerslie location or the one in Botany, and he had always been considerate about that at least. That consideration, I would later realize, was one of the few things I had never needed to question. I picked up. "Dad," he said. "Hey. So, Priya and I have some news." I set down my pen. I knew, the way fathers know things before the words arrive, what he was about to say. I had noticed something different about my daughter-in-law at the family lunch 2 months prior. Something in the way she moved, something in what she ordered and then barely touched. I had said nothing. It was not my place. "She's pregnant," I said. There was a brief pause on his end. "Yeah. 11 weeks. We've known for a bit. We just wanted to be certain before we told anyone. 11 weeks. I did the arithmetic without wanting to. They had been sitting at my dining table not 3 weeks earlier. Had eaten the roast I'd cooked. Had accepted a check I'd written for their kitchen renovation shortfall, and had said nothing. But I understood. 11 weeks is still early. Miscarriage is a real fear. I told myself that, and I meant it. "That is wonderful news, son," I said, and I felt it entirely. "Congratulations. Both of you." Liam laughed a little, that slightly awkward laugh he has had since he was a teenager when he is genuinely pleased but doesn't quite know how to wear it. "Yeah. You're going to be a granddad, Dad." We talked for perhaps 12 minutes. He mentioned they were thinking about doing a get-together of some kind. Something to celebrate. A baby shower, or maybe a combined gender reveal. He wasn't sure yet. He said Priya's family was very excited. He said he'd keep me in the loop. We hung up, and I sat for a long time in that back office, listening to the hum of the refrigeration units through the wall, and thinking about what it meant to become a grandfather. Let me tell you who I am, because it matters for what comes later. My name is Russell Taine. I am 64 years old. I live in a 3-bedroom house in Howick, on the eastern edge of Auckland, that I have owned outright for the past 8 years. The house is not grand by any measure. The deck needs repainting. The garden has more fern than I intend, but less than I deserve given how rarely I get to it. I drive a 2018 Hilux with a cracked mud flap I keep meaning to replace. For the past 19 years, I have owned and operated 2 specialty butcher shops. The first I opened in Ellerslie in 2006, with savings my wife and Geyer and I had been building since our late 30s. The second, in Botany, came 7 years later after the first had found its footing. They are not glamorous businesses. I am on my feet most of the day. I negotiate with suppliers. I manage staff rosters and cold storage compliance, and the 1,000 small problems that come with running any food operation. I wear an apron more often than I wear a collared shirt. My hands are the hands of someone who has worked with them every day for 4 decades. What most people looking at me would not guess is that between the 2 shops, the buildings I own, and the investments Geyer and I made carefully over the years before she passed, I am comfortable in a way that doesn't announce itself. Comfortable in the way that stays quiet and gets on with things. Geyer died 6 years ago. Breast cancer, diagnosed late, moved fast. She was 57. She had been the engine of our household in ways I could not fully see until she was gone. And then I saw all of it at once, which is its own particular kind of grief. After she passed, I think I did what a lot of fathers do when they don't know how to hold the space that loss leaves. I filled it with practicality. I kept the shops running. I kept showing up, and I gave Liam money because money was something I knew how to give. and I didn't always know what else he needed from me. Liam was 29 when Ngayar died. He handled it in his own way, which mostly meant not handling it openly, which he gets from me. A year later, he met Priya at a work function. She was 27, a project manager for a property development firm, sharp and efficient and put together in a way that I respected immediately. Her family was from Wellington originally. Her father a retired QC. Her mother with old connections in the legal community. They had a large house in Remuera and spoke about their social calendar, the way some people speak about the weather as though it simply existed and everyone was inside it. Priya was not unkind to me. I want to be precise about that. She was never rude in any way I could point to. She was polite in the way that a person is polite when they are making an effort to be. And the effort itself is the thing that lets you know where you stand. She called me Russell in a tone that made it sound faintly administrative. She asked about the shops with the particular smile people use when they are asking about something they consider beneath commentary. When she was around Liam, she spoke about his potential in a way that occasionally required her to speak across me as though I were furniture that had been left in the wrong room. I tried. I want to be honest about that. I showed up to every occasion they invited me to. I remembered her birthday. I brought good wine when I came for dinner. The kind I knew her family drank. Not the kind I would have chosen for myself. I was warm to her parents when I met them, which was infrequently. I never once said, in Liam's presence or anyone else's, what I sometimes thought, which was that my daughter-in-law found me embarrassing. The pregnancy shifted the dynamic in ways I hadn't anticipated. Priya's parents, Deepak and Sunita, became quickly and visibly involved. They talked about the baby at every gathering in the particular way of people who are staking a claim. They had opinions about prams and about birth centers and about which suburbs had the best school zones. I told myself I was being ungenerous. I told myself I was projecting. I was probably right. And I was probably also not entirely wrong. 3 weeks after Liam's call, I was doing the end-of-day till count at the Ellerslie shop when my phone lit up with an Instagram notification. I am not on Instagram by choice. Liam had set up an account for me 2 Christmases ago, so I could see photos of the new house as the renovation progressed, and I had never quite gotten around to deleting it. The notification was a tag. A woman I didn't recognize had tagged me in a comment on a post. I opened it. The post was a photograph, a long table set with flowers and pale pink and white balloons, and small gold signs spelling out words I had to enlarge to read. A group of women around the table, glasses raised, smiling. Priya at the center, wearing a white dress, looking genuinely happy in a way I hadn't seen in a while. In the corner of the frame, visible but not centered, Sunita, Priya's mother. And beside her, Deepak. Both of them included. Both of them there. The comment that had tagged me read, "Russell! Such a gorgeous celebration today. Hope you're recovering from all the fun." The account was someone named @Bridget M. Auckland, someone I had never met, who had apparently assumed I had been there. I read it several times. I stood in my shop with the till drawer still open and the radio still going, and I felt something go very still inside me. Not hot, not immediately angry, just still. The way a room goes still when a window closes and the wind stops. I called Liam. He didn't pick up. I tried again 40 minutes later from the car. He answered on the second ring, and I could hear, faintly, the sound of voices and music in the background. A gathering winding down. "Dad. Hey, sorry, it's been a big day. Was there a baby shower today?" I asked. A pause. The background noise seemed to recede, as though he had moved to a quieter part of the house. "Was there a celebration for your child today, Liam?" And I was not there. "Dad, her parents were there," I said. "I can see in the photograph that her parents were there." He started explaining then. The way people explain things they have already rehearsed. Priya had wanted something intimate. Her friends were all from a particular world, a particular social circle, and she'd been worried about things feeling awkward if the groups were mixed. It wasn't about me personally. They were going to do something separate with me. Something smaller, more relaxed, something that suited everyone better. I listened. I let him finish every sentence. "All right, son," I said. "I understand." I drove home on the motorway with the window down and the sound of the harbor somewhere off to my left in the dark. I thought about Ngaire on the drive, the way I often do when something happens that I wish she were here for. She would have known what to say and when to say it. She had always been harder than me when it mattered, and kinder than me in the right moments, and she would not have let this go to the point it had reached without addressing it cleanly and early. I thought about everything I had done for Liam, not as an accounting exercise, not with resentment exactly, but clearly, the way you see clearly when you finally stop squinting. I had paid the deposit shortfall on his first apartment in Grey Lynn, $14,000, because he had moved in before his probationary period at work ended and the bank wouldn't extend. I had covered a personal loan he had fallen behind on when he and Priya were first together. $9,200. Because Priya had called me one evening in a voice I hadn't heard from her before, a voice with actual worry in it, and said they were in trouble. I had contributed $18,000 toward the kitchen renovation the previous year, money given freely, with nothing said about repayment, because I had wanted the house to be right for them, because I had wanted them to be comfortable. The total, if I thought about it, sat somewhere above $50,000 over 6 years, not counting the smaller things, the grocery runs, the unexpected bills I had absorbed without being asked, and I was not the right fit for a baby shower. I sat in the garden that evening, in the old wooden chair beside the camellia that Ngaire had planted the year before she got sick, and I thought about all of it for a long time. I did not feel devastated. I had expected to feel devastated, and what I felt instead was something quieter than that. The feeling of something that had been slightly off balance for a long time, finally settling into a clear and level position. I called my accountant the next morning. Her name is Barbara, and she has handled my accounts for 14 years, and she does not fuss or waste words, which is why I trust her. I told her I wanted an accurate summary of all financial transfers to Liam over the past 6 years, documented. She said she'd have it ready within the week. Then I called my solicitor, a man named Graham who had handled Ngaire's estate and who I had worked with on the property purchases. I told him I wanted to look at how I had structured things and make some adjustments. I told him I wanted any financial support going forward to be documented formally, and I wanted a clear record of what had already been given. He asked several questions. I answered them. He said he'd have a draft for me by the following Friday. I did not call Liam. I did not raise the shower again. When he texted me 4 days later to ask if I wanted to come round for dinner the following weekend, I replied that I was flat out at the shops, which was true because it was always at least partly true. I was always busy at the shops. The call I had been half expecting came 5 weeks later, on a Thursday evening. It was Priya. She called more than she texted when there was something specific she wanted, and I had noticed over the years that her voice had a particular register it shifted into when the conversation required something from me, warmer than usual, a little more unhurried. "Russell. Hi. How are you? We've been thinking about you." "I'm well, Priya. How are you feeling?" We talked about the pregnancy for 3 or 4 minutes. She was doing well. The 12-week scan had been clear. She mentioned, almost as an aside, that they had just found out it was a girl. She mentioned it in the way you mention something to someone whose reaction you're not quite sure about, covering the possibility that they might not respond as hoped. Then she said, "So, I actually wanted to chat with you about something. We've been going through everything with the baby coming. and there are quite a few expenses that have come up that we hadn't fully anticipated. Liam and I were wondering whether you might be in a position to help us out a bit. We're looking at around $20,000 for the nursery fit-out, some medical costs that aren't covered, and just a buffer going into the first few months. $20,000. I let the silence sit for a moment before I spoke. Can I ask you something first, Priya? Of course. Was I invited to the baby shower last month? The pause was shorter than Liam's had been. She moved through it faster, which told me she had considered this possibility. Russell, I really did want to talk to you about that. It was meant to be a very small, intimate thing. Really just my close girlfriends, and your parents were there, I said. They're my parents. I understand that. I'm asking you a direct question. Was I invited to the celebration for my grandchild? A longer pause this time. She said something about it being a different kind of gathering, about her friends being from a particular background, and her wanting everyone to feel comfortable, about how she hadn't wanted me to feel out of place. Out of place. I let her finish. When she had finished, I said, Priya, I appreciate you calling. I need a few days to think about this. She seemed surprised I hadn't simply agreed. She said, of course, take my time. She said she hoped we could move past the misunderstanding about the shower. She said that Liam loved me and they both wanted me in their lives and in their daughter's life. I said, I know. I'll be in touch. I called Graham that same evening. What I had set in motion 5 weeks before was not a complicated thing. I had placed my primary assets, the house, the 2 shop premises I owned, into a family trust with a clear structure. Any financial support provided to Liam going forward would be documented as a formal loan with written terms. The amounts given over the previous 6 years, totaling $51,400 as Barbara's summary confirmed, were being reclassified from gifts to loans with a record of the principal. Graham sent a letter by registered post. Professional, factual, calm. It outlined the amounts and dates. It stated that all future assistance would require a written loan agreement with agreed repayment terms. It noted that the existing $51,400 had been reclassified accordingly and that a repayment schedule could be arranged at mutual convenience. I did not ring Liam before the letter arrived. I did not prepare him. He called me the morning it arrived. I was at the botany shop when the phone went. Dad. His voice was different from any version I had heard from him before. The ease was gone from it. What is this? It's a letter from my solicitor. I know it's from your solicitor. Why, Dad? What's happening? I was standing near the walk-in chiller with the morning's delivery still on the bench behind me. Liam, I said, I need you to hold 2 things in your mind at the same time. The first is that 6 weeks ago I was not invited to the shower for my own grandchild because your wife was concerned I wouldn't fit with her social circle. The second is that 5 weeks after that, I received a phone call asking me for $20,000. I need you to sit with both of those things and tell me how that's supposed to feel. He was quiet for a long moment. Dad, the shower was a mistake. I know that. We both know that. It should never have. It wasn't a mistake, I said. I kept my voice even. A mistake is when you forget to post an invitation. What happened was a choice. Someone chose that I was not the right kind of person for that room. I'm not angry about it. Not anymore. But I am not going to go on being a financial resource for people who are not comfortable having me at their table. That is not a father and son relationship. That's a different arrangement entirely, and I should have been clearer about the difference years ago. He started saying many things then. He said I was overreacting. He said Priya would apologize, that she understood she'd handled things badly. He said they were about to have a baby, and this was the worst possible time for this kind of conversation. He said he needed me. Not a letter from a solicitor, not a formal accounting of every dollar ever given, just his dad. I said, I am still your dad. That has not changed. and will not change. But I am done being your bank. I should have stopped a long time ago, and I didn't, and that is my failure as much as anyone's. I gave you money when I should have given you harder things. I made it easy when I should have let it be difficult sometimes. That's on me. Another long silence. I can't pay back $50,000, Dad. I know that. I said. I'm not asking you to pay it back tomorrow or next year, or possibly ever. The money is not the point. The point is that from now on we are honest with each other about what this is. If you need help, you come to me directly. You look me in the eye, and we sit down like adults, and we talk about it. No more calls from Priya about cushion money. No more soft approaches. If you want support from me, you come to me yourself, and we agree to something in writing, like men. A very long silence. Did she call you? He said. His voice had gone quiet. She called me the same evening. She asked for $20,000. I said. I heard him exhale, a long and careful breath. I don't know what he said to Priya after that call. I wasn't in that house. But something shifted in his voice before we hung up. Something that sounded, to me, like the beginning of clarity. I told him I loved him. I told him the door was open. Not to the money, but to me. To a real relationship built on honesty. If he was willing to do that work, I told him I intended to be the best grandfather to that little girl that she would ever have, if he would let me. We said goodbye. I went back to the morning's delivery and finished the work. The weeks that followed were quiet. Liam did not call. Priya did not call. I went to the shops. I had dinner with my older sister Val, who lives in Tauranga and visits every couple of months, and I told her the whole of it over a bottle of Hawke's Bay Red at my kitchen table. Val is 67 and has never once softened a truth she felt needed to be said. She listened to all of it without interrupting, which is extremely unusual for Val, who has opinions the way other people have furniture, everywhere, and solid. When I finished, she put her glass down and looked at me steadily and said, "You should have done this when Ngayer was still alive. She would have sorted it in a weekend." "I know," I said. "Do you feel better?" I thought about it honestly. "Yes," I said. "I do." She nodded and picked her glass back up. "Then stop making that face and pour me another." Liam called on a Sunday afternoon about 4 weeks later. His voice had settled into something I hadn't heard from him in a very long time. Something less performed. Something closer to the way he used to talk to me when he was in his early 20s, before Priya, before the renovations and the Remuera dinners and the slow accumulation of a life built to impress people who weren't looking at him the way I was. He said he wanted to talk. "Not about the money," he said. "Just to talk." We met for lunch at a cafe in Pakuranga, roughly between his place and mine. He was already there when I arrived, which surprised me. Liam had been late to things his entire adult life. Sometimes by minutes, sometimes by half an hour, always with a reason that sounded reasonable. He was in a corner seat with a flat white, and he looked tired in the way that has honesty in it. Not the tired of a busy week, but the tired of someone who has been doing some uncomfortable thinking. We talked for nearly 3 hours. He told me things I had not known he had been carrying. He told me he had spent the years since Ngayer died feeling like he was always one step behind some version of himself he could never quite reach. That Priya's world, the Remuera dinners, her parents' opinions, the particular language of that social set, had made him feel like he was perpetually auditioning for something, that the money I'd given had been the thing that let him maintain the performance, and that some part of him had known, all along, that the performance wasn't his. He told me he had spoken to Priya after my call. He said she had rung her parents, Deepak and Sunita, and that the conversation had not gone the way she anticipated. Apparently, Deepak had some views about the shower decision that were not sympathetic to Priya's reasoning. Sunita had said something along the lines of being quietly appalled, which, coming from Sunita, carried considerable weight. Priya had been different in the week since. Quieter. She had not raised the $20,000 again. He told me he had been thinking about what I'd said. About making things easy. About how a person can love someone in a way that doesn't actually serve them, that smooths away the friction that might have taught them something. He said, "I think I've been coasting, Dad. For a long time." I said, "I know. And I helped you do it. That's what I need to own." He looked at me for a moment, in the way that children look at their parents, when they are recalibrating who that person is. "I didn't know you saw it." "I didn't. For a long time," I said. "Or I saw it, and I looked the other way because it was easier. After your mum died, I didn't trust myself to push back on anything. I thought I might break something." He was quiet for a bit. Then he said, "You didn't, though. You didn't break anything." He cried a little. "I won't pretend I didn't. There's no shame in it." There was a lot in that conversation that had needed to be said for a long time, and when things that have been sealed up for years finally get air, it moves through you in ways that don't always stay behind the eyes. We did not fix everything that afternoon. We did not land on some neat and complete resolution, but we were honest with each other in a way that we hadn't been in years, maybe longer than years. And that was not nothing. That was, in fact, a great deal. He told me, before we left, that they had settled on a name, a girl's name. He said they were going to call her Aroha. He said it had been Priya's idea, which surprised him, and which he thought I should know. He said Priya had said that whatever else was going on, she wanted the baby to have a name that belonged to this place, to New Zealand, to the land she had chosen to build her life in. He seemed genuinely moved when he said it. I thought about Ngaire, who would have found something to love in that immediately, who would have said something I could not predict and would not forget. I drove home on the eastern motorway with the windows down and the smell of the sea coming in off the Waitemata. I passed through Pakuranga, and then Howick and I thought about the first shop, the one in Ellerslie, which I had opened with a second-hand fit-out, and Elise, my accountant at the time, had thought was too ambitious on a street that people said was too far from foot traffic to work. I thought about the early mornings and the slow building of a customer base, one handshake at a time, one decent cut of meat at a time. I thought about Ngaire wrapping parcels on Saturday afternoons because I was short-staffed and she had never once complained about it, not seriously, not in a way she meant. I thought about Priya's friends at that shower in their beautiful clothes with their particular kind of confidence. And I thought about how little they understood about what it takes to build something from nothing. And then, just as quickly, I thought that that was an ungenerous thought and let it go. They were not bad people. They were people who had grown up inside a certain set of walls and assumed those walls were the whole world. I had been guilty of similar assumptions at different points in my life. About different things. A granddaughter, Aroha. Ngaire would have held her so carefully. She would have sung to her in the way she used to sing to Liam when he was small. Not loudly, just under her breath, like the words were for no one in particular and for the whole room at the same time. I took the Howick off-ramp and drove through the familiar streets and into my driveway and sat for a moment before going inside. I had made mistakes. I owned them. I was not the same man I had been 5 years ago or 10. I had confused showing up with being present. I had confused giving with teaching. I had let money speak when I should have let silence speak. When I should have let difficulty speak. When I should have trusted that Liam was capable of more than I had given him space to be. I was done with that. I went inside and put the jug on and stood at the kitchen window looking at the garden, at the camellia beside the old chair. And I thought about what comes next. Not the money. Not the letter and the trust documents and the formal repayment schedules. All of that was just paper. The real thing. The thing that mattered. was a little girl named Aroha who was going to come into the world in a few months and need someone who would tell her the truth about what things cost, in every sense of that word. Who would teach her that how you build something matters more than how impressive it looks from the outside. I could be that person. I intended to be. There is something I have learned from running 2 small businesses in a city that did not make it easy, and from being married for 26 years to a woman who was braver than me in most of the ways that counted, and from losing her, and from the years of trying to fill what she left behind with the wrong things. The most expensive thing you can give someone is not money. It is the steady, ongoing refusal to let them discover what they are capable of. When you absorb every difficulty, every shortfall, every awkward consequence of choices made carelessly, you are not being generous. You are being afraid. Afraid to see them struggle. Afraid they might think less of you for not catching them. Afraid to find out what the relationship looks like when the money is not there to smooth it over. The bravest thing a parent can do is step back and say, I believe in you enough to let this be hard. I love you enough to stop making it easy. I should have said that to Liam a decade ago. I say it to him now. Not in those words, but in the way I show up. In the way I ask hard questions and stay at the table while he answers them. In the way I am present without writing checks to prove it. It is not too late to be a father instead of a fund. It is never too late for that. Aroha will be here in 4 months. I have already been to the shop in Hawick and picked out a small paunamu I want her to have. A tiny hei matau, a fish hook, for safe travel, for strength, for provision. Not expensive, but chosen. That is the difference, I think. The things that last are not the things that cost the most. They are the things that were chosen with care by someone who was paying attention. I am paying attention now.